Hi everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I am Nicole. I'm the Head of Technology Solutions and Delivery at the Bunker, which is part of the Cyberfort Group. And Simon Carter is the MSP Technical Lead for UK and I at Nutanix. So our focus of today is to talk through one of the components of Nutanix, which is Flow Network Security. So this is a capability that provides really significant levels of security, so it protects platforms, workloads, and data. And we want to use this session to talk through the business value, some of the trends that we're seeing in the industry, the capabilities of the feature, and a bit of a demo into what it can offer. Next slide, please, Simon. So I just want to start with a bit of a brief intro into the Bunker and Nutanix for those that aren't as familiar with them. So at the Bunker, we deliver UK sovereign colocation and secure cloud platforms for organisations with complex critical data. We have a really core focus on delivering secure, resilient and compliant infrastructure, which is all designed to reduce risk and give teams the freedom to innovate, so we take away that challenge of managing the infrastructure for you. We operate from ex-military data centres. So we've got one in the Ash radar station down in Kent, which is a former nuclear bunker 100 foot underground. Really cool site. And the other is a former RAF base at Greenham Common in Berkshire. So we've got a really rich history in security and sovereignty, and it's always been core to our service offerings and our values, which is why Nutanix Flow Network Security is a really strong value proposition for us. It resonates a lot with what we do and the platforms that we build and manage. And we also recently hold one of the new Nutanix verified solution badges for dedicated private clouds. So we are the first MSP in Europe to gain this. And this helps validate our capabilities, design, build, and manage private cloud solutions. So we're expecting as well the sovereign cloud badge soon. We're just finalising what that looks like at the minute.
Yeah, and I think that's really key. So Nutanix, from an MSP point of view, we have something like 800 MSPs worldwide. So for the bunker to literally get the first one in the mirror is a big piece for those guys, and for us, right? They're one of the first MSPs that come Nutanix, and have been a shining star for us ever since. And specifically, we're seeing a lot of, as Nicole mentioned, clients looking at, I need sovereignty. I need to make sure that if I put my data in this data center, it stays in this data center, and I can guarantee that, which is becoming more and more prudent in these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Simon. Jump on the next slide, please.
Hmm.
I'm going to keep this one super light touch, which is just a really brief overview into Nutanix itself. There are a number of sessions on Nutanix 101 and the fundamentals of the software and what it can offer, and deeper dives into some of the other areas. But Nutanix provides a trusted platform for modern enterprises. So it delivers one platform with one experience that can be run anywhere, and it enables organizations to run traditional and AI workloads, whether that's on-prem, at the edge, in the cloud, with a sovereign operating model. So that sovereign and security theme is really consistent between both Nutanix and the bunker, and why I think we work so well together.
Yeah, and sorry, Nicole, go on.
No, crack on.
You can tell we practice this, right? This is seamless. No, sorry, Nicole, carry on. Sorry.
No, I was just say, as a Nutanix customer myself, and a Nutanix technology champion for 26, I've seen a really significant and impressive evolution of the product. What you can see here on the page at the minute, and that service offering over the last few years has developed massively. And I think it's got a really strong and promising roadmap. So there's a whole heap of features that Simon and I can talk through if anyone wants to off the back of this webinar. But today, what we're going to focus on is that Nutanix cloud infrastructure piece at the bottom, and more importantly, the security features that sit within inside that. So NCI, Nutanix Cloud Infrastructure, is the distributed infrastructure platform. So it's combining the compute, the storage, and the networking from a cluster of servers into that single logical pool with integrated resiliency, security, and performance, and a really simplified administration. And I think Flow, in my opinion, is one of those most frequently critical and valuable capabilities that I see organizations interested in.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. So the NCI bit is almost like our core piece. So if you look on there, when I started at Nutanix some 10 years ago, we were very much a VDI play. So that bit at the top there saying any app, any scale, it was very much around Citrix and VDI solutions around that piece. Since then, it's pretty much any app we can support. We've just started actually supporting third-party storage as well, which is something as a someone that's fought against storage arrays for the last 10 years is a bit of a hard take for me to take, but I actually see the benefit in basically opening up our platform more. Um, but no, as we said, NCI is kind of the core, and then we've just added all these services over time. So unified storage service that basically allows us to provide the likes of files and objects outside the same cluster. So came about originally from a VDI point of view. Where do I put my profiles? Do I put it on this NetApp box, EMC box? Well, you can actually put it on Nutanix. We can serve that out absolutely fine. No presentation would be out there. Who mentioned. So we've got quite a good story for it. We've done VDI for since we begun. So from a GPU point of view, really strong in terms of our relationships with NVIDIA and soon to be AMD as well. But adding to that as well, if you look at what AI requires, most of the apps run as containers. Well, we have our own containerized Kubernetes platform. Most of them need GPUs. They need different types of storage, whether that be file, object, or block. We can provide all that as well. So that kind of wraps that in really well. And then so we have a database service. So again, if you're an MSP or if you're just an end user, that ability to, I'm suddenly getting all these different databases I've got to manage. It's not so much the case anymore that I've just got an Oracle database or SQL database. I've got Postgres, I've got Mongo, I've got all these new ones. Well, how do I manage the day zero, day one, and day two operations of that? We make that really simple on our piece. And then hopefully what you'll see in the demo as well is from a management point of view, these are all bolt-ons in terms of completely separate different products. These are all managed the same way. So whether you're in Nutanix database service or unified storage, you basically administer it, manage it, deploy it all in the same way. It's not a case of going into a completely different console. So on that, let's move forward. So again, the whole thing around zero trust has become massive over the last couple of years. When I was originally again doing Nutanix, we had a security slide and we talk a little bit about it, but customers weren't too interested in that. They wanted to talk about other stuff. I found that over the last couple of years, the first things that customers are asking us around the security posture of the platform. And when we're introducing them to MSPs such as the bunker, they're asking them about that as well. So that's becoming more and more paramount to customers moving forward. And that's no surprise, right? So we're seeing the rise in cyber attacks week on weeks and weeks and weeks. Every time they're seeing additional ones adding to that. A lot of these are obviously becoming a lot more prevalent with AI as well. So AI is assisting in those sort of attacks, especially phishing ones, making them more and more obvious. I've even got caught on one a few weeks ago. Our company runs them every so often just to trick us. And to me, it was just came from my manager, had the right name, looked like can you open this? I need you to check something specifically about MSP, so it knew exactly about my details. And then you've been caught. Luckily, it was just a simulated one, so I just had to take an exam at the end of it and being told off like a naughty schoolboy. But again, they're just becoming a lot more advanced. What's quite interesting is over 61% rely on lateral movement. So when we speak to customers, a lot of them have that north-south divide. So they've got that firewall, they've got access in terms of we've got the keys. They can't get into the kingdom, as it were. But what we're seeing is once they're in the kingdom, that's completely open. We want to rely more on this hotel style, that even if you can get into the front door, you can't get into the rooms because each of the rooms is more secure. And then we're seeing the cost of cyber attacks, right? So, the whole piece around them putting up for ransom, basically encrypting your data. This is becoming more and more prevalent, and this is where we're seeing things around immutable snapshots, etc., being able to get your data back without it being changed.
And Simon, can I just use some of those points to talk about some of the use cases that I see with Flow Network Security?
Sure, yeah, sure.
So a lot of them, historically, at least from sector as an MSP that I've seen, are around those heavily regulated industries such as finance, defence and healthcare. But over the last year in particular, where you're getting more data breaches and cyber attacks like you see here, there is a rise in that need or even a desire for data sovereignty. It is a buzzword at the minute, and even sort of at the board level, it's becoming a topic of interest. So it's becoming of more importance and value across the board for all industries, not just those historically secure ones. So I think whilst it's a component that might be non-negotiable in heavily regulated industries because it's needed to hit the sort of the compliance requirements that they have, for platforms with either deep levels of segregation, if they've got really sensitive data or data that generates a lot of revenue, it's really clear to see that the value of data is increasing, and therefore the need to protect it kind of heightens. And I think no matter where you are in the maturity levels of your current architecture, there's ways to implement Flow that can make a real improvement on that level of security without sort of a scary, resource-heavy project or change. And yeah, we're seeing a lot of value in that.
Lovely. So if we just take a step back for a second in terms of, so from a Nutanix point of view, again, we're kind of aligned with the NIST cybersecurity framework. So that's, around identifying, protecting, detecting, respond, and recover. And we have a number of solutions that sit around that. It's also worth knowing though that, that when we're not just the one company that you need in terms of cybersecurity. You need a mixture, a plethora of different solutions, be that from your MSP, do that to your additional firewalls, security, etc. So, but from a Nutanix point of view, what do we have? Well, first of all, we have the identify piece. So Nutanix has built into it LCM, so Lifecycle Manager. So this is where we are updating the product in terms of the firmware, the BIOS, the hypervisor, and we're making that dependent mapping. So we're making sure that we're using good patches. We're making sure that they are dependent on other parts. So if you were to upgrade a BIOS on the server, we'd make sure that the firmware was correct, so you didn't get any issues that way. We have vulnerability patching, so we have a vulnerability patching database. So the latest vulnerabilities that come out, you can be seen where they are in terms of when we're going to release the patch, and you can automatically, using LCM, patch your Nutanix solution from that point of view. From a tech point of view, we have data at rest encryption, both in flight and at data at rest, and we can do that at the hardware layer, or we can do that at the software layer. We're going to touch, obviously, today around the micro-segmentation piece on our zero trust networks, but we also have zero trust access as well. So, we're looking at the likes of RBAC, IDP, etc. In terms of detection, we have ransomware detection, so something like Data Lens that will look at certain signatures and block them, and that can be combined with the use of the likes of microsegmentation to basically isolate an environment before it gets out, and like you said, lateral movement across those pieces. And also Security Essentials, so not something we're touching on specifically today, but really works hand in hand with Flow. So Flow is really great at securing those policies, but if you want to, well, what's my current environment? Seeing what ports are open, what's not. Security Essential can provide you that map, which you can then start to lock down on your policies. And then respond, right? So again, we can look at things regarding automation in terms of, like we said before, this has been attacked. Can we isolate it? Or we can look at alerts on hosts and unstructured data blocking and third-party integrations. So again, about the fact that it's not just Nutanix. We need to work with the whole ecosystem. And one of the pieces that Nutanix has been very strong with is realizing we're not the only vendor out there. We need to work with our partners. And then finally, return to normal as possible. So I mentioned that piece around immutable snapshots. So a lot of times people can get into customers' backups and they can encrypt the backup. Well, if it's immutable, you can't encrypt it. So again, we're seeing a lot of being around being able to replicate data or data to immutable types of storage where you're protected. And again, the great thing about Nutanix is we have different rates of RPO. We can do synchronous, near sync, which is down to like a minute, or async, which is 60 minutes or longer, depending on the RPO, and they can all be adjusted depending on the customer's requirements. So we said we're going to do this session specifically around flow microsegmentation, and I don't want to teach anyone to suck eggs, but the idea there is the fact that, if they do get into your environment, then you're in a situation where basically the blast radius is massive, right? They can start to get across. So microsegmentation is that way. Again, using the hotel analogy, that even if I get into the front door, I can't get into the guest room. So can I make sure that my VMs, my applications are only talking to other applications that are allowed to talk to? I mean, basically, can I reduce that blast radius to make sure that if there is infected, it's not going to get across to my entire environment. And if you look at something like Cyberfort or other MSPs, that becomes even more prevalent because it's not just their business. They're hosting customers VMs in their environment. So if I'm tenant A and there's an issue, I can effectively affect tenant B, tenant C, tenant D. So the likes of the bunker will lock that down into an isolation policy, which means, firstly, only if I'm tenant A, I have no idea how to get to tenant B. There's no way I can get across to them. I basically firewalled them off. Within that as well, if I'm tenant A, then maybe my applications, my web servers can only talk to my application servers. They can't talk directly to the database servers, and my application servers can only talk to my database servers, but they can only talk over a specific port, for instance. And we'll go through some of those in a little while. So when I talk to guys, I mean, this is not new, right? People have known about the idea of looking at microsegmentation, but when we usually talk to customers about that, there's always challenges, right? So if you look at the environment where most customers are happy with a firewall, it's very simple. I will basically put it at the top. I'm going to let all traffic in. I'm going to block certain bits of traffic, and that's done. So I don't have to worry about what's sitting under there. That's just managed fine. So if you start looking at lateral security, you're adding a lot more complexity to that, right? I'm looking at, well, I need to understand what I'm going to secure. I need to understand what roles and workloads. It's another tool as well, right? So I've got another tool I've got to manage, I've got to look after, I've got to install it, I've got to maintain it. The benefit of something like Nutanix Flow is obviously it's built into the platform. So when I said earlier about that lifecycle manager being able to manage updates and maintenance of the entire environment, that takes into account Flow as well. So if you're a Nutanix customer, that's fine. It's all managed the same way. What policies do I need? So I've secured. I think I've secured the app, but how do I make sure I don't break things? Is there an easy way for me to look at that? And then again, just the runaway rules and chasing network boundaries. So that whole piece just becomes a lot more complex. And for a lot of customers, it just becomes, I'm just not going to bother. I'm just going to use use standard firewalls. That way, it's nice and easy and simple to utilize. So this is where. So we have that comprehensive visibility. So we can see from the start what the traffic is actually doing, and then you're in a situation where you can then lock that down. And we use a concept of categories. So these are like key value pairs, and we'll talk about that, and I can show you that in the demo a little bit more. And the other piece is around the flow bit, that because it's integrated into Nutanix, it works across all our infrastructure that we support. So if you have data centers like the bunker, then you can have that on the data center. But even if you have like little edge solutions that will run at the edge, can all be managed centrally. And we also support cloud as well. So if you're running Nutanix in the likes of AWS, Google, or Azure, then again, you can use all that feature set. So it's not a specific feature set that's locked down to, oh, you have to be an enterprise customer. You can use it across the whole board. So let's talk a little bit about how it works. So at the start, we've got a policy, and we'll talk a little bit about the policies in a minute, but everything is managed from the main. I mentioned before that Nutanix is managed from Prism Central. So Prism Central is where you manage the entire cluster and all the different services that are around that. And then what we're basically doing is we are creating a key stroke pair, and we're mapping that to workloads. So we may want to create an isolation policy, and we may want to isolate tenant A from tenant B. So we just look up all the VMs that are in tenant A, and we give them a category of tenant A, and we look up all the VMs that are in tenant B, and we give them a category of tenant B, and then we create a security policy that says tenant A cannot talk to tenant B. Done. And that means when you're creating new VMs, if you want to add them to it, you just add that category. If it's tenant A, tenant B, and they get automatically added to that security policy. So there's no in terms of configuration drift from that point of view. And enforcement happens dynamically. So that's across the entire cluster. So you can have multiple clusters. So that means that when you create a policy, that's enforced across all your clusters. And then important on this bit as well, and then we get asked this, is around the networking. Well, what specific networking do I need? Do I have to have Cisco? Do I have to have Arista? Do I have something configured on the networking? No. This is all done at the virtual level. So we use constructs around like VLAN or virtual PCs, virtual private cloud. Sorry, but the networking that sits above that, this doesn't way. So if you're just using standard switching with no complex rules, etc., this is absolutely fine. And if you've got more complex switching, again, this works absolutely fine. And then, as I said, we'll use categories, which I'll get into in this. These are kind of use case-driven policies that we typically see. So the first one there is around application policies. So this is more looking at a three-tier application. And we've got an example in a minute that we'll show you, but that ability to say what can talk to the web server, what can talk to the app server, what can talk to the database server, and also how do they talk within each other. So, for instance, I don't want the web server talking directly to the database server. I only want the app server talking to the database server across this port, etc. The other bit that I briefly mentioned is around the isolation policy. So again, this can be we've talked about from I'm isolating tenant A from tenant B, but this could be isolating production from development. This could be isolating anything. It's basically just creating an environment that basically I'm tagging and saying these two environments cannot talk to each other. The third option is around VDI policies. So VDI policies tend to be more dynamic. So it's not obviously a fixed environment. It's a user logging in. So again, it's looking at the idea of the user talking to the likes of Active Directory and saying, John's working in our department, so you need to deploy him a H desktop that sits in the HR environment, and that's how we configure that. And then finally, we have the quarantine policy. So quarantine policy, again, like we were saying, I've got something now that's been under attack, quarantine. Now, do I quarantine that and only allow specific forensic tools to access it? Or do I completely strict quarantine and then allow nothing to attack it? So again, we'll show you on the demo about that piece. So, let's start looking at the application segmentation with Flow. The first bit is obviously we're going to identify our VMs. So we're going to take our VMs and we're going to add categories to those. So here we have our Apache. So these will be our web servers, the Django, Rails, and Python. There'll be our app one. We've got our shared services that need to access all the tiers, and then we've got our database fee. So we'll create categories for each one of those. We'll then, and then we can see here we've assigned the different categories. We'll then define our inbound and outbound policies. So for each one of these applications, what can actually come in and what can come out. So in the case of the web, we can have anything HTTPS coming in, but from an out point of view, it can only go out to our app. And likewise, from our app point of view, we can have anything coming in from the web. So nothing else is coming in, stuff that the web server is providing it. And based on our shared apps. From our shared apps point of view, we're obviously going to take stuff that comes in from the web app and database, but we're not going to put anything out. And then finally, in our database, we're only going to be able to take stuff from the application. Web servers or nothing else is going to be able to get to us. And we're going to talk out to our shared applications. And then we can define our inter-tier policies. So between those web servers. So here, these web servers, there's no need for them to talk to each other. So they're blocked. From that point of view, we may have clustering, we may have high availability. They need to be talking. Likewise on our database. But again, from our shared services, there's no need for those to talk to each other. Again, reducing the blast radius between those pieces. And we do all this via Flow Network Security. So again, and in the demo, I'll show a demo similar to this specific piece where we're doing that for an application. Again, this is going to show us very much we're going to identify environment. So in this case, it's taking the environments of IT, HR, and sales. But again, this could be based on production and DR. This could be based across multiple different tenants. It really doesn't matter. It's just key value pairs. So here we've just created these categories. We created HR, IT, finance, and sales. And again, we're going to create an isolation policy. So nice and simple. Every VM that gets created for HR just gets a little category called HR. Likewise for IT, finance, and sales. You create an isolation policy that basically says none of them can talk to each other. Again, very simple to create and set up. Based firewall, as I mentioned. So again, we're not knowing the actual the IP address or the actual VM at this stage. So we're going to have a AD domain sync to Prism Central. We've got a user called John. He's got a VDI machine and he works in HR. So we're going to talk to Active Directory. We're going to get the information regarding John's ID. And then we're going to say, oh, actually, yep, he's fine, he's good. Can you place that desktop in the HR category? HR category has already been set up, isolated from the other environments. And then we automatically enforce that from the login point of view. So again, a nice simple way of creating a sort of IDP-based firewall approach there. Final one in quarantine, right? We have two policies. We have strict and forensic. So strict is literally what it says. Once we hit quarantine on a VM, that's it. Nothing, it can't get out. Nothing can get into it. So we're completely isolated from the environment. And then we also have forensic. So that's basically where we're allowing a specific scan to come in, but we're going to block all traffic out. And again, in the demo, I'll show you this piece. So we'll just let that build out. And then before I move into the demo, there's just a couple of additional features that we've added on our latest version to the Flow. So again, Flow is very low for firewall, but there's times obviously you need to look at layer 7 and from that point of view. So we allow now inline allows integration to third-party firewalls. So we can do that in transparent mode. So the likes of Palo Alto, Checkpoint, etc., are all supported from that point of view. And we also have the ability now to monitor tools, sniff traffic, so you get complete visibility into your network. So that's via the VTAP mode, which basically creates a and with that, and let's hope this works, we're going to go into the demo. So let me just come out and go into this.
Just while you're doing that, Simon, I think it's worth maybe mentioning a case study that we've got that kind of correlates a lot of the features and capabilities that you've mentioned. So we had one customer, as an example, that had grown organically from a handful of servers to 40 plus, and their security posture didn't evolve with them as they grew. And it got to a point where they were operating on a single flat VLAN, had a huge number of firewall rules and policies, which was very much keeping the IT team awake at night. And they had hundreds of customers that needed to keep segregated from each other, but still were able to communicate with the centralized databases and a number of other centralized services. So Flow was a really obvious choice for them. And I think one very valuable piece is the ability to implement in a monitor state before you apply everything. So it gave a really powerful view of that traffic flow, unearthed a large number of connections that it didn't know existed. And I think practically, if they were going through traditional firewalls, it would be a really significant mapping, trawling through process that would be not enviable or arguably even achievable job compared to the simplicity and visibility of Flow. So they were able to create and apply these policies to an estate of around 2,000 VMs without disrupting the network, their firewall, all that existing security measures, and more importantly, that customer experience. So I think the ease that you can add and adopt these improvements is really impressive, and that customer impact can't be understated.
No, that's great, thank you. And again, this is where it all works, right? This is where we get actual customer testimonials showing that. So it's one thing for me, the vendor, to tell you how great our product is, but you need it from real world people like the bunker, etc., and other customers. So it's explain exactly how they achieved piece on that. So what you're seeing here is Prism Central. So this is I've only got one cluster, which is this one here. If I had multiple clusters, they'd all show up here, and I can dive into any cluster that I want. The first bit, again, as I wanted to show you, is that from a Nutanix point of view, what I mentioned from the start, everything can be done from here. So you can see I've got my compute environment. This is where I can create my VMs. I can look at my Kubernetes clusters. I've got templates. I can drop down into storage. I can see all my storage. We can obviously focus here on the network, so we'll talk a little bit around that. I can look at my data protection, so I can look at my where I'm replicating my VMs to. I can even drop down into my hardware, so I can see my hosts down to the NICs, etc. So everything can be done from this piece, and the bit that we're specifically talking about today is around the security policy. So this is where the Flow security policy sits. So we'll just click on this, and what this will bring up is the different security policies. So as you can see, we talked around these. I've got the quarantine. I've currently got 2 quarantine policies. And again, this was mentioned at the start. I've got a forensics one. So this is where I'll be able to, using my forensic tools, scan that environment, but nothing else gets in, nothing else gets out. And I've got a strict quarantine as well, where nothing gets in and nothing gets out. I've got an isolation policy, and this specific policy is isolating two tenants from each other. And I've got an application policy here, and we'll create another application policy in a second. And then I could have a shared service policy, but I haven't done that as yet. If I go into the isolation policy, then the first one, and I just click on it here, this is showing what it's doing here. So it's isolating tenant A, which consists of 6 VMs, to tenant B. But as we can see here, there's no actual VMs associated with that. So we need to associate VMs. What I'll show you while we're doing that is if I go down into categories, which are now part of Admin Center, and if I go down to the isolation one, you can see here how I've created that. All I've done, if I go to update, it gives you an easier one, is I just created this simple category. I called it isolation. I gave it a key value of tenant A. I gave a key value of tenant B. I could have another one, tenant C, tenant D. I could also obviously create this as HR apps or production dev. Very simple to create and do. So going back into my infrastructure piece, my VM, so that's here. This one, I'm just going to say that anyone user 2 is tenant B, just for argument's sake. So let's just click all those ones like so, and then I'm going to manage categories. So what's this going to do is this is basically going to look at that, and I'm going to say, right, well, from this point of view, I want to add, I want to class these as tenant B, and I'm going to save that. So that's done. It's added all of those to that policy. So now if I go back to security policies, and then I pick on the isolation policy, click on here, I can see now that I've got 6 VMs sitting in tenant A and 6 VMs sitting in tenant B, and they are completely isolated from each other. If people prefer a list rather than a global look, we can do it that point of view. And as Nicole mentioned, there's 2 ways of doing this. You can do apply enforce or apply monitor. So if I did monitoring, it would just basically look at the traffic that's currently going between them, and I could hit enforce. Now, of course, these 2 environments have just been set up so there's no traffic that you can see between these at the moment. But if this was a live environment, you would, from this point of view, see what traffic is either being blocked or is being allowed to go between those 2. The other piece is around quarantine. So if we click on the quarantine, we've got this one here that's forensics. So we can see here that specifically we're allowing a VM, which would be a category we would create called VM forensic VM. We haven't created it yet, but we can do. And this would be only allowing to talk to the quarantine VM over port 443, and then as we can see, there's nothing out on that piece. So what we could do is, and then if we just pick, see from here, there's nothing comes in and nothing comes out. So pick a VM. Let's go up and pick a VM. Just let's pick this one here. So we'll grab him. We'll right click and we'll click quarantine VM. And then do we want it to be strict or forensic? We'll hit forensic. So we'll quarantine that. Now go back to our security policy. We're going to pick we go into we can now see that those VMs that were tied to that have been blocked. And we're also blocking this specific network address that was going to get to it. We can see there that that's been blocked. And then we can obviously then adjust it. We've got a forensic VM. So if we want to add a forensic VM to that, go back up here. Let's say this one is a forensic VM. We can manage categories, so we'll go to manage categories. And we'll give it the forensic VM, and we'll save that. Now if we go back down to our security policies, and we pick the quarantine forensic, we can see now that it's allowing that forensic VM in over this specific port, which we've configured, but everything else it's blocked. And then this is trying to get out to these addresses as well, and we've blocked it. So from a quarantine point of view, we're in a good spot there. And then from an application point of view, let's create a security policy here. So let's say that we've got a user 2 app that we want to look after, as it were. So we're going to apply an application security policy. We'll go into next here. So first of all, we're going to add the secured entity. So here we're going to have a VM, and it's going to be web, and let's just say it's user 02. Yeah, user 02 web is the one we look after. So all that. And then we're also going to want to do the database as well. So just a simple user application. So we've got there database and a web. Now we're going to add what can come in here. So what can come in? Well, first of all, we can have users coming in on specific public IP addresses. So we'll pick an IP address group which we've previously set up. So public internet addresses, they can come through on their browser too. And also maybe they've got they can access parallels as well as a broker system. So again, we'll just do address group. We've already predefined parallels address group, and then maybe they also want to come in on VM as well. So we'll pick a desktop at desktop 2. So currently we've got these 3 sources of coming in. These 2 web-based, database and web. And then for this, we're going to allow, or we'll just let the external firewall deal with that piece. So first of all, we've now got to look at, okay, well, what can we do? Right? We don't want this public internet access getting directly to the database, but what we do want to do is obviously get them to talk to the web. So we click here, and then we click here, and we're going to basically say public internet to the web. What traffic am I allowing? I'm going to allow all traffic? No, I'm going to allow specific traffic. So I'm going to add specifically just TCP, and I'm going to allow TCP port 80 across there. So now I've got anything from those 5 public IP addresses which I've pre-created can talk to the web one, but they can only talk over TCP port 80. Likewise, for parallels, it's going to be the same thing. So I'm going to allow only specific traffic. I'm going to add TCP, and it's going to be port 80 from that point of view. So that's all good. But from a desktop point of view, I want to be able to talk to that as well. So I'm going to do that quickly. Add new TCP 80. So I've got all these environments being able to talk to these web tiers via TCP 80. But my desktop itself, I want to be able to talk to the database. So I'm going to add one for the database. And this time it's going to be across TCP again, but it's going to be across 2 ports. So it's going to be across TCP 22 and also TCP 5432. So I'm going to save that. So now we've got our desktop, which can talk to both the web over port 80 and can talk to the database over ports 22 and 5432. But our parallel sessions can only talk to the web and to the and our public internet access can only talk to the web as well over the same ports. But now what I want to do is I want to lock down these 2. So if I come in here, I want to make sure, go into my web one, I want to make sure that from my web point of view, it can only talk to the database over a specific port. So again, we'll add TCP 5432. So now we've got an environment where these two can only talk to each other over 5432. And then that's done. We go to next. We can just save the policy without applying it at this stage. We may want to come down to look at it. We can apply it in monitor mode so we can see what policy the would actually block without actually blocking in traffic, or we can hit enforce. And then we just confirm that. And we've created our user app. And any traffic that will go from that, we would start to see from this point of view. And again, if you don't like the visual, you can look at it as the list, so you can see exactly how we've created those. And we could obviously have added outbound rules to this as well, going to a specific environment, or we want to add maybe the shared services piece to that as well. So hopefully that just gives you a flavour of the flow piece. And that, let me just go back to the presentation. So, sorry, Nicole, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's worth touching a bit on how much detail you've gone in there and what Flow's capable of. I think it's really great. So hopefully there's a nice understanding of what you can achieve, but also how that correlates to the business value that Flow can provide. So what I commonly see personally is that key driver is that microsegmentation element that you covered. So the ability to segment your data, limit that lateral movement, and control the traffic flow. But if we step back a little bit from that technical capability, what does that actually mean for businesses? What are they achieving, getting from it all? So I think primarily is having that better alignment between your security and your business agility. So it really enables organizations to strengthen their security, but can still support rapid digital transformation and that adoption side of things. So quite often in the past, I've seen having strong architecture and security measures has been quite a blocker to growth and innovation like this. I think it's pretty simple with Flow. And I think that visibility of the traffic flow, as well as the level of protections, like I mentioned earlier with that kind of case study, that the understanding that it can give you of your platform as it is, that knowledge is really hard to get manually. So having those kind of visuals that you've got there, as well as the list capability, makes it a lot easier to implement the fixes, best practice, or sometimes even the MVP. So you're identifying those risks a lot faster, the dependencies, any efficiencies that you've got to lead to quicker support and sometimes even compliance audits. Just you've got the info at hand, you know it's accurate and doing what you need it to. And where the policies are managed centrally, it really reduces that reliance on the complex physical, traditional security posture, so around your firewalls and your switching. I think that's what enables and allows adoption to be a lot simpler and a much quicker win for people, particularly if they have inherited or are managing quite a difficult firewall stack. I've seen people with crazy amounts of firewall rules, DNet rules, all sorts of stuff over the place, and you don't have to look at that to implement Flow. Sometimes you've still got a way of making the security better without necessarily having to deal with all the trouble and pain points that you've got in place.
And I guess with that, so the demo that I showed, we've got that canned version of that, which you can follow from our test drive site. Very kindly put up the barcode on that piece, so please give that a look. But happy to answer any questions you've specifically got around this or any Nutanix topic while we're here on that piece. Either put your question in the chat. Actually, that's the only way of doing it, right? Because it's a webinar, so you can't talk. So yeah, feel free to write a question in the chat, and we'll see if we get anything through, and we'll go from there.
So while we're waiting for any questions, Joseph, that QR code takes you to the test drive, but we will send the direct link out as well with the slides and the link to the webinar. And anyone that completes the test drive in the next 2 weeks will receive a gift card from us, as well as anyone attending at all gets a seed garden in honour of World Bee Day that we mentioned at the start of the call, thanks to our partners Arrow for that.
Lovely. We've got a question. So we've got one. What are the biggest challenges you see to implementing Flow? Yeah, so from my side, I guess the bit that I see is customers that have got an existing environment and just don't know what policies that they should create, right? They don't know where the traffic flows are going. And one of the products that we haven't talked about is Security Essential. So Security Essential is great at that. Security Essential will basically show your entire environment in terms of what's talking to what. And then you can basically say, okay, I'm now seeing that this database is going out to all of these environments. And within Security Central, because it hooks into Flow, you can create policies on the fly. So that's probably the biggest area I see. I don't know, Nicole, if you've got any thoughts about, from your point of view, implementing it, if there was any particular areas that were challenging.
Yeah, I was honestly going to say exactly the same point. If you're working with a brownfield site and there's potentially a lot of complexity, a lot of history, you don't know why certain policies might or might not be in place. It needs a bit of consideration, I guess, and that thought behind the logic of it before you can start implementing the technical changes.
Perfect. And then another one on a similar sort of piece actually, like if you have an existing VMware environment, how easy it is to migrate to this new environment. So here I'm guessing you're talking about, I've got NSX, for instance. So I've got my policies set up. I'm quite happy with this piece. But then, how do I migrate that across to that? Is there a way of doing that? And there is now. So if you'd have asked me this question 3 or 4 months ago, the answer would have been there's not an easy way of doing it. In terms of getting those policies across, you'd have to redo them. But Nutanix Move, which is our free migration tool, which allows you to basically migrate VMs from different hypervisors across to Nutanix, now supports the ability to migrate these sort of policies. So if you've had those policies created in an NSX environment, we can basically take them, translate them into a Flow environment. So making that as seamless as possible from that point of view.
And just to echo that, my experience of Move has been absolutely brilliant. The ability to do things with such minimal downtime, it's a real impact to our customers.
Yeah, it's something. I mean, I think we're up to something like 25 to 30,000 migrations a quarter at the moment with that Move product. It's like version 6.6 or something, and it's free, right? So if you're looking at, I always say if you're starting to look at Nutanix, you can run Nutanix Community Edition, and which is free to run. You can download Nutanix Move, which is free. And you can start looking at how you migrate across. Here we go. I've got another one. I get how Flow works for the web app type model, but we're struggling to visualize the categories and rules we need to create and manage our Windows domain environment with multiple root VPCs, not NAT ones, etc. Where should we start with it? Good question. If I can find out who you are, anonymous attendee, let's have a piece offline and we can cover that in more detail on those. But I mean, we can work through that piece.
If you drop us a chat to Simon and myself directly, you can avoid speaking to everyone in the chat and we can follow up after.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, and I think with that, we're at 10 to. There you go. I said it wouldn't last an hour. I said it'd be around 45 minutes. I'm slightly over, but I think that's fair. So I think it just leads us to say thank you for your time. And like I said, if you've got any queries or want any more information, then please reach out to myself or Nicole. We'll be happy to answer those questions.
Yeah, thank you. Hope to speak with you soon.
Thank you very much. Cheers all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.